Next, the V&A Museum in London is under fire as it's placed Margaret Thatcher alongside Adolf Hitler and Osama bin Laden in a new exhibition. The former Prime Minister is described as a contemporary villain and shown as a spitting image puppet. The decision to include Baroness Thatcher in the exhibition has caused outrage and led some to discuss some of the achievements of Britain's first female Prime Minister.
And let's remind ourselves of one of her greatest hits at the Conservative Party conference in 1980. Thatcher famously laid out her political style, telling critics, for those waiting with bated breath for that favoured media catchphrase, the U-turn, I have only one thing to say. U-turn if you want to. The lady is not for turning.
I'd have liked it more if you actually tried to do the voice as well.
Oh, OK.
Go on.
No, I'm not going to do it.
Come on.
U-turn if you want to. The lady is not for turning. How's that?
That's not too shabby, actually.
Not too bad, I suppose.
You could do a good drag act.
Well, we're going to talk to someone now who will remember her voice very well. He was important to her, trust me. He's political columnist and former political editor of The Sun, Trevor Kavanagh. Trevor, great to have you on board because you will be able to explain, as I've been trained to explain, because we're men of a certain age, that, you know, she was re-elected 4 times. This modern generation said, oh, everybody hated Thatcher, she was a villain, look at that, right up there with Adolf Hitler. She was not. She was wildly popular, was she not?
She was, and just for a moment there, Kevin, I thought that she was back here with us.
There you go.
Marvellous impression. Look, I'm one of the few surviving people who actually were at her side through the 8 years that I covered politics with Margaret Thatcher as Prime Minister from '83 until she departed. I travelled the world with her in the RAF VIP jet, which took her to every major capital in the world. And I also remember vividly the sort of praise and adulation she received, not just from her allies, but from those who were not necessarily well disposed to her, not least the Russians, who christened her the Iron Lady. And when she went to Moscow in the 1980s to open the very first McDonald's in the Soviet Union, as it was then, she was absolutely mobbed in Moscow. And when she went to places like, as what was then known as Kiev, she was mobbed again. Francois Mitterrand famously had a crush on her and described her as having the eyes of Caligula and the lips of Marilyn Monroe. And I think that when I was in Paris once, someone said to me, a senior politician over there, when you finish with Margaret Thatcher, can we have her over here? I mean, these were the sort of tributes that were paid to her. And also, I mean, the thing is that intelligent Labour and left-wing politicians at the time were also in awe of her. Dennis Skinner, the famous beast of Bolsover, the truculent lefty in the House of Commons, was absolutely obsessed with her and full of admiration for her robustness and the decisive way that she carried through government.
Yeah, one thing that, I adore Margaret Thatcher. I was alive during her time in office. She snatched my school milk, but I forgave her for it. But I remember as a teenager picking up a biography of Thatcher from my grandma's bookshelf and reading it and just going, wow, that is inspirational. And what I don't understand is I think she is still potentially an extremely inspirational figure to women out there in the world thinking, I can do what Thatcher did. Now, we live in a country now that we've had 2 female prime ministers. I wouldn't say either of them were a patch on Thatcher. But it is still, I think, very important to raise up historical women like this and show the world that, you can be female, you can be right-wing, you can actually be assertive and not be called a monster or demon. So why is it that the usually very woke left want to keep doing that?
It's very difficult to know. It's actually really, for what is basically an academic institution, the Victoria and Albert Museum, this is bovine stupidity and amazing ignorance about the history of Britain. If you have the time, if you haven't already read it, try the 3-volume biography of Margaret Thatcher by Charles Moore. It's not just an interesting read, it's a riveting, almost like a novel, turning the pages of some of the most momentous periods in our recent history. And it is worth saying that those left-wingers who are whinging now about her are the beneficiaries of the economy inherited from the Tories by Tony Blair and Gordon Brown in 1997, which was on train as the most rapidly growing, prosperous. We were one of the most prosperous nations in the world at that time. And look what they did with it.
And just before you go, Trevor, try to sum that up, because what she really achieved was she took us out of the stranglehold of the unions, which were literally wrecking the country. I feel very sorry for particularly the miners who all lost their jobs, but the coal industry at that point was unviable. It was economically suicidal. She had to do that. She had to break the stranglehold of the unions, and that's what she did. And she spotted things like, Docklands in London. She got that developed. She turned us from a 1970s-style union-gripped, wrecked country into a massive, modern economic powerhouse and set the seal for the future, didn't she?
She did. She performed all the decision-making activities that the Labour governments that preceded her had ducked in a craven way. And it was not because she was spiteful towards the trade unions. It was because of the way the trade unions, the leaders of the trade unions, were abusing the power that they held. And they were holding the country to ransom at the time. So what she did was to take the difficult decisions, bring the union leaders to heel. And in the end, she was the one who provided the background for what turned out to be a jobs miracle. I mean, more jobs were created in and after the Thatcher years than had ever been created before. And I think that it was the Russians that branded her the Iron Lady because of her decisive and consistent patriotism for Britain, which we lack so much today. And I just wonder sometimes how she would have behaved if she'd become Prime Minister now instead of, say, Penny Mordaunt or some of the other candidates jostling for the position right now.
If we could only resurrect her.
The country would be saved, I'll tell you.
It would.
Trevor, fantastic
Thanks,
to talk to you as always. Thank you.